Oh. Oh. Well, I was mesmerized by the opening. I was mesmerized by the technical aspects of introducing you to our sponsors. So let me do it my way. My name is Edward Peruta. This is Summary Judgment. Normally on a Saturday night, I would have sitting to my right and to your left, Attorney Rachel M. Baird. She can't be with us tonight. She's got some issues at home that she's dealing with that are of a very serious nature, and my thoughts are with her tonight and her family. She's dealing with a very rough situation. So she texts me before the show, and she apologizes for not being here, and she asked me if I'm going to be wearing my prison outfit. Now, she didn't like that prison outfit, so I told her that I was going to do the show topless with a microphone duct taped to my chest. So, Rachel, if you're watching, I didn't do that. I'm going to try to be serious. But before I begin, I need to do my little spiel. To anybody who's watching this, wherever you are, on the internet, in Borneo, New Zealand, Australia, wherever, call your mother, father, sisters, brothers, neighbors, friends, grandparents, co-workers, fellow students if you're in college, high school, or junior high school, because I don't think the grammar school kids are watching, and tell them that this program is your program. It belongs to the people who watch it. It will be better if people participate. We have a phone number, 860-721-8814. Now, I expect that I may get one phone call tonight, but maybe I could get more. I don't know who's watching. We don't know who's watching. We tape it live, real time. We reduce it to a computer file, and then we put it up on the internet for you to watch. So we have YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of the things that I kind of understand but don't understand, because sometimes this gets far too technical for me. We have a teleprompter here in the studio, and I do it the old-fashioned way, paper. So let me begin by doing this. This program would not be possible had it not been for Connecticut Carry, a nonprofit 501c4 organization. Cox Communication, who took my suggestion, acted on my request, put me together with a small public access studio in the center of Connecticut, Wethersfield Community Television. I'd like to thank the people at Wethersfield Community Television for giving us this time. I know that this program is on cable in 6 towns in Connecticut: South Windsor, Manchester, Glastonbury, Newington, Wethersfield, and Rocky Hill. Channel 15. I know that it could be on Wethersfield on 14 and 15. I know that this program is streaming right now on the internet, live. I feel bad tonight that Rachel's not here, but to be very honest, every once in a while, maybe it's okay if she's not here, because then I can really say things that can't be attributed to her. So, as a member of Connecticut Carry, we've done a lot of seminars in Connecticut. Not a lot. We've done seminars in Connecticut. And one of the seminars we did was, I believe, in February of 13 on the weekend of a blizzard. And amazingly, like 40 people showed up in Cromwell for the seminar. And the seminar was basically, what do you do when law enforcement comes to your door? Now, you're going to hear me over the course of this program be repetitive with certain things that I've got in my head. One, there are 5 groups of firearm owners: hunters, competitive marksmen, recreational shooters, investors and collectors, self-defense individuals, and criminals. The reason we're doing this show is to create a dialogue, start conversations, to emphasize the fact that as firearm owners, we're not criminals just because we own firearms. The mainstream media does what they do. The mainstream media picks up on every negative firearm issue that occurs and televises it, prints it, talks about it. But they always leave out one factor: the unarmed, defenseless victims of crime. Especially crime when a firearm is involved. 5 groups. I told them to you. You'll hear me say it again and again and again and again. And I've had conversations with people, and I haven't had an opportunity to really do a seminar on it, to put it together. But after talking to a lot of people, and having a lot of time as Attorney Baird's legal investigator, I came up with a very simple way to refresh myself on how to think when you're a firearm owner. And I came up with a very simple number: 1245. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Because if you're a firearms owner, a law-abiding, stand-up firearms owner, and you're starting to get jammed up by law enforcement or some branch of government, whether it's law enforcement, judicial, administrative, whatever, it's never just a Second Amendment issue. There's always cases where somebody says something exercising their First Amendment right, and because they're a Second Amendment believing firearms owner, they suffer consequences for what they said. Where if they weren't firearm owners, it would be fluffed off and put aside. But because they exercise their Second Amendment rights, everybody pays attention to what they're saying and jumps on firearm owners when they're exercising their First Amendment right. Fourth Amendment rights. I grew up in a country where there was a television code of ethics. And I think that under the television code of ethics, they always had to show a crime being solved or a criminal being caught by the end of the show. That was part of the code. In other words, Perry Mason, somebody does something bad at the beginning of the show, you have to show them getting caught and being tried or whatever by the end of the show. Well, that's not real life. It doesn't happen that way. And I grew up truly believing that nobody could come into your house without a warrant. that no police officer was going to lie to cover up mistakes or shortcuts. Then I got out of the service and went to the police academy and became a policeman. I went to Manchester Community College here in Connecticut to start a course in law enforcement. And a adjunct professor, retired police chief, asked everybody in the class, how many people think that 90% of crimes are solved? Everybody raised their hand. He said, no. People don't get caught for doing bad things. Okay, I can live with that. But when you catch somebody that does something bad, why don't you do something to them? That hasn't been happening lately. So we've got First Amendment, Second Amendment, now we got Fourth Amendment dealing with warrants. And I'm going to get into that here because in the state of Connecticut, in 1999, the Connecticut State Legislature, in their infinite wisdom, passed a law, 29-38C to be exact, where it allowed law enforcement to go into somebody's home and seize their firearms and ammunition or whatever without any without any evidence of a crime. In other words, if two police officers sign an affidavit that they believe the individual is a risk to themselves or others, they each sign their statements, affidavits. They fill out a request for a risk warrant on a specific form issued by the state of Connecticut. They present it to a judge who reads the statements, the facts, and he either says yes or no to permit law enforcement to seize firearms without any crime being committed. Now, I can understand the theory. If you think somebody's out of control, if you think somebody's going to hurt themselves, if you think they're going to hurt themselves or somebody else, yeah, I think that it's a good idea to try and get the firearms out of the guy's hands. But has it been abused? Is it being abused? I believe it is. I believe it has been, I believe it is, and I believe it will be in the future. And the terrible part about it is the courts, the judicial side, the judicial part of our government sees the mistakes being made by the executive side of our government, law enforcement, and is approving things that were never intended or condoned by the legislation. Now, that's the Fourth Amendment. We'll get into that. And there's a reason. Now we get into the Fifth Amendment. I know that police officers do not have to read you your Miranda rights. They do not have to do it unless they intend to ask you a question or they're going to take something you're saying and use it against you. When I was a young police officer, I had somebody in the back of the car said, you know, you haven't read me my rights yet. And I turned around. And I said, I don't have to read you your rights. I don't need to ask you a damn question. I saw you do it. I don't need to ask you whether you did or you didn't. I saw you do it. And other people saw you do it. I don't have to ask you any questions. Now, when you get him to the police station and you're going to be asking him questions, where do you live? Where do you work? Have you ever been arrested before? Et cetera, et cetera. You're going to start to ask him questions. Now you have to read him his rights. At some point in the booking process. And if the person says, I don't want to talk, I want my lawyer, you have to stop. Now this is the Fifth Amendment. The right against self-incrimination. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just an ordinary Joe shit-the-rag man who grew up in a family of public safety servants, police, fire. I had a mother who was always talking about things in the news, things in town, things in the state, and she was talking to people about things, and she was talking to people who I learned to respect. And I listened, and I learned, and I became a policeman, and I went to the police academy. And, you know, I may not have been a policeman for 25 or 30 years, but I did go to the police academy, I did learn, and I did graduate and get a diploma. So I do have some idea on how laws are supposed to be implemented and enforced. I do understand the construction of a statute and how it's supposed to be applied. And some things have never changed. You know, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. So let me start by saying government is creeping away from the basic principles. Government is probably thinking that they're doing it for our good. I have a list. I'm going to read the list. And it goes like this. 1, 2, 4, 5. That's 1245. Know your rights and have a plan. Don't try to think it up as it's happening. Go to some of these seminars. Go to the seminars put on by Connecticut Carry, by other organizations, training seminars. If you're a firearm owner, go. If you're not a firearm owner, go so that you understand. If you have people in your family that have firearms, go and learn about the law. California has an assemblyman by the name of Das Williams, D-A-S Williams, common spelling, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S. Das Williams and another individual from the California Assembly are proposing in California legislation similar to the legislation that we already have here in Connecticut. A risk, civil seizure, civil take somebody into custody type legislation when they think that the person is a danger to themselves and others. And the ironic part is, these people are proposing it in California and assuring everybody, especially in the media reports, that nobody will lose their due process rights. But maybe somebody ought to bring them from California to Connecticut and look through some of the files in Rachel Baird's office. Rachel Baird's office. And if the clients approve, let the people actually see what happened. How can you possibly permit law enforcement to go into someone's home, seize property, seize the individual, ship the individual to an emergency room for evaluation, take the firearms or whatever you're seizing to the police department and put them in an evidence room, and then go back to the police department, sit at your computer. I don't even think they have typewriters anymore. Sit at their computer and type up 2 affidavits and a warrant application to put in front of a judge to get permission to do what you did. You're not seeking a warrant to get permission. You're seeking a warrant to get approval for what you already did. Here's the problem with that. When they're sitting there putting their stories together, their affidavits, they're going to leave out the places they screwed up, they're going to have time to put the story together so that it's perfect. It's not the way it works. You're supposed to put down on a piece of paper what the person said verbatim first, and then present it to a judge. Not seize the person, seize the firearms, go back to the police department and type a report about what was alleged to have been said, but leave portions out of it. Because it sounds better. Dwayne Dutel, Norwalk, Connecticut. You know, everybody was paying attention to the message he left on a doctor's answering machine. But when they put what Dwayne Dutel said in quotes, they left out the last two words. Thank you. Because they didn't even have a copy of the message at the time they were going for the warrant. Now, Rachel's not here. I'm not going to get into names and cases because I am her legal investigator. But I know that Dwayne Dutel doesn't mind me talking about his story. And California thinks that they've come up with a mousetrap that's going to solve problems. Well, for people who believe in the Constitution, that statute has created more problems. And Rachel had a case where they did it. She went to court at the Superior Court level, lost. She went to the appellate court level, lost. And the Supreme Court wouldn't listen to it in Connecticut. So I guess the Supreme Court not taking it leaves the appellate decision as the law of the state. Mark my words. This is my crystal ball right here. Someday, sometime, in some case, somebody is going to take the Connecticut risk warrant activities that are going on to a federal court, which is going to probably rule in the favor of the officers, and then it's going to go to a federal circuit court of appeals, Second Circuit in New York, and they may even approve of it. But I cannot, in my wildest imagination, believe that what's currently taking place in the state of Connecticut and what is being proposed in the state of California passes constitutional muster when you have the right integrity in the people judging what happened. In the news this week, Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. Now, I'm not going to talk about it. It's being talked all over the place. But I do have a comment. There's one thing that I cannot go without commenting on. You do not release 5 high-ranking members of the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. You don't do it. Better you walked into Gitmo and just put a bullet in the back of their heads and told the world, I'm sorry, that type of negotiation is no longer possible. They're dead. Now, this country is going to enter a debate. This country is going to have 2 sides, 3 entities, 2 sides. Those that think it was good, those that think it was bad, and those in the middle who don't give a shit. Well, I got to tell you, I do give a shit. And I'm on the side that says, I'm glad he's back. We have a uniform code of military justice. He's in a hospital. He's going to have to tell his story. But we still live in a country where you're innocent until proven guilty, even though there's allegations against you. So that's a raging story. My gut tells me that they had the opportunity to get him back any time. But with the VA shit brewing and all over the news, it was time. So, could it have been a political move to do it when it was done? I don't know. We'll have to find out. Because the news cycle appears to be turning away from the scandal in the Veterans Administration. I've got stuff that I'm going to talk about. I've got stuff that I'm going to read. But it appears that the news mainstream brick and mortar is turning away from the VA issue. I'm a veteran. I'm a 100% disabled veteran. I'm a 100% disabled combat veteran. I'm not going to turn away from it. The senators are saying that they've reached a deal on veterans' health care. I went to a news conference for Richard Blumenthal earlier this week. I actually spoke to Richard Blumenthal. He knows who I am. And I sent some information to his VA liaison, Heather. Well, we'll see. I don't expect much to happen. There is no downside to rogue or defiant behavior on the part of public employees. At the federal level and at the state level and in many cases at the local level. Now hear me again. There is no downside to doing improper acts. There isn't. There is no downside for government employees who don't follow the law. There's no downside for having false lists. There's no downside for withholding public information. There is no downside. Or whatever downside there may be, it's minuscule. Congressman Jeff Miller and the House proposed legislation. The Senate shot it down. But now the Senate's come up with an answer. Now, Santa Barbara, the high schools, the courthouse in Georgia, the knifing in Milford, Connecticut, some of the things that are happening. There are countless unarmed, unprepared victims. That's the one piece that I would like the papers and the radios and the television news, the brick and mortar, to say. X number of unarmed individuals shot in Santa Barbara. Hold on a minute. Okay. Okay. Hold on a minute. Did you call? Are you calling the show? Okay. What's going on? The screen is black on the internet? Okay. I don't know what's going on. 721-8814. 721-8814. Okay, bye. Huh? Go ahead. Oh, crystal ball. Oh, crystal ball. Will my wife from California call in on my cell phone during the show again? I doubt it very seriously, says the crystal ball. Now she has the master control number so that she doesn't call into the cell phone on the set. Oh, crystal ball, will I ever have a cell phone on the set again? I don't think so.
I have that clip for 5 minutes.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, my wife is out in San Diego. She watches the show on the internet, and I guess she must have saw it go black on the internet. I don't know whether it did or it didn't, because I don't really watch the internet when I'm doing the show. So she called in, and it's okay. The old way was the simple way. Something happens, call into the host and tell them. But now we're supposed to be this professional, everything's hoity-toity. So 860-721-8814. Now, back to the list. As we get closer to the elections in November, we're going to start talking about politicians. Politicians who voted in 2013 and are now looking for our votes in 2014. And I'll be honest, I'm going to do everything I can, everything in my power, to make everybody know who voted yes and who voted no regarding the limits on Second Amendment rights in the state of Connecticut. We're going to talk about delays in obtaining various firearms permits. And this goes back to, excuse me, this goes back to there's no downside to not complying with the law. Here's what I've noticed. You apply for a pistol permit in the state of Connecticut. There's a time frame for obtaining it built into the law. But there's no penalty phrase, there's no penalty phase, there's no penalty provision in the law for a chief of police in a local issuing authority who doesn't issue according to the law. So when you put your application in, you're supposed to have it within 8 weeks. That doesn't happen in a lot of communities here in Connecticut. So you sit there and say, oh, it's a backlog down at the FBI, it's a backlog at the state police doing records checks. Our laws address that. Our statutes address that. But you forget, I'm Peruta v. California, I'm Peruta v. San Diego. I pay attention to what's going on out in the state of California. After my decision was rendered, people put in applications to get, in California they're called CCWs because you have to conceal your firearm there. But people are being told, oh, your appointment's going to be sometime at the end of 2016. Your initial appointment to come in to get a pistol permit. Or, well, it's taken too long to do this, or we can't get this back, we can't get that back. No. There's a 90-day limit in California. There's an 8-week limit in the state of Connecticut. Why aren't these public agencies complying with the law? Not happening. Now, so you wait the unreasonable amount of time to get a constitutionally protected permit. You wait to get a constitutionally, you wait to get the permit to exercise a constitutional right. And when it comes decision time, you didn't dot an I, you didn't cross a T, or you didn't tell us about the arrest that was thrown out and dismissed. you're denied. Your permit is denied. Now you have to appeal. Or you have a permit, you do something legal, you get arrested, and somebody takes your permit away, and you get a revocation letter. You have a right to appeal. You get to appeal denials and revocations and restrictions. Not bad. Fine. If it was a driver's license, you'd have to have your hearing within 14 days. Buddy, it's a permit to carry a firearm or a permit to purchase a firearm. You own firearms? 22 months to get a hearing? So now you wait the exorbitant amount of time to get it. It's not given to you. It's not issued to you for whatever reason. Now you got to wait another 22 months to get it. Somebody could get killed in that amount of time. But what do the courts say? 22 months to wait for a hearing on a constitutionally protected permit? A permit that allows people to exercise constitutional rights? That's fine. That's reasonable. They got a lot to do. You just got to put up with it. But with driver's licenses, you got to get a hearing right away. With food stamps, you got to get your hearing, you got to get your food stamps right away. But if you're a firearms owner, get in line, buddy. Now, in Rachel Beard's office, we have clients who, for whatever reason, right, wrong, or indifferent, have lost their right to possess firearms now. It may change in the future. They may be able to get them back, but right now, they've got to divest themselves of their firearms. Well, to a collector who has an M60 machine gun or some various types of automatic weapons, semi-automatic, automatic weapons that require federal approval to transfer ownership. If I own an M60 machine gun and you want to buy it, we have to go through an FFL. We have to submit the paperwork. You know, there's paperwork that has to go down to the feds, Form 4 or something like that, with a check for $200, and I guess they do a background check. Why is it taking 9 months? Why is it taking 6, 7, 8, 9 months to get the feds to do the paperwork? Federal approvals should kind of get done. But that's a delay in getting a pistol permit, a delay in getting a federal firearms transfer approval. Now you have the Freedom of Information Act. And I had a hearing this week. And I've had a lot of hearings lately. And what I hear from government is, we don't have the number of people to handle this. We are overwhelmed with requests. We just don't have enough people to do this. But for a person who kind of keeps track of legislative proposals, why isn't anybody taking the problem and going up to the legislature and saying, we don't have enough people, we can't do it in the time the law says, you need to give us more time? Well, they haven't done that. And maybe they've asked for more people, because damn sure they asked for twice as much fees. October 1st, 2009, all the fees in the state of Connecticut doubled. They started getting twice as much money to do the job. But it took longer to do the job. So we've got delays in obtaining permits. We've got delays in getting hearings. We've got delays in transferring firearms through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We've got delays in the Freedom of Information Commission. But then we have, and I'm going to cite to the Volkov, I don't even know how to say his name, Volkov conspiracy. Eugene Volkov is a very prominent firearms expert in the country. He's a academic. You know, he's a professor. He teaches constitutional law. Pay attention to this choke point. Evidently, the Bureau of Firearms, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, BATF, puts out a list of bad businesses, risky businesses. And I have it here, and you know, I can read it. But it's they've actually got an organized program called Choke Point, where they actually put the classification firearms dealer, ammunition dealer, and I'd have to go through it, and I'll come back to it, but it's the list. Operation Choke Point. And the great thing about doing programs today versus doing programs in the late 80s and early 90s is if I tell you to Google Operation Choke Point with quotation marks around it, you can find exactly what I see. I read a lot. I read a lot over the internet. I don't read as many hard papers as I used to because to be very honest, they're toilet paper, or you need to put them into those log rollers and make fireplace logs out of them. The mainstream media doesn't have a set of balls anymore. So now I talked about Choke Point. Well, Choke Point says make it harder for legitimate business people to operate their business, their internet business, the financial aspects of their business, because you're going to have banks saying, we don't want your business. Well, I know they're doing it with marijuana dealers in Colorado, can't find banks to take all the money they're making. But we're not talking about marijuana. We're talking about firearms. And the last time I checked, an honest person has a constitutional right to possess a firearm in his home. And if he has the right to possess a firearm in his home, he must have the right to acquire it. Now, Heller and McDonald, reasonable government regulation. Now, Rich Burgess in Master Control is going to be doing backflips, pulling his hair out, spitting all over the control room window when I say, okay, reasonable regulation. Permits. Yeah, he's going nuts. Permits. But if you're going to put the permits in, make the permits work. Make the permits good for acquirable in a reasonable amount of time. Run a background check on me. Clean. This moral character thing? Fine. Make me fill out an application? Okay. Nothing there? Give me my permit. That's as simple as it is. Choke point. Well, can you tell me where an FFL is? Look, there's been a couple of firearms dealers here in Connecticut put out of business. There are FFLs around the country being put out of business. And it's either being put out of business because all of the paperwork wasn't done right. Okay, fine. Let me ask a question to everybody. When an FFL, Federal Firearms Licensee, is doing all of these background checks and the paperwork and everything for one firearm to transfer from person A to person B, who are they really working for? You think they're working for the buyer and the seller? That's a crock of shit. They're working for the federal government. They're performing a function in behalf of the federal government because they are a federal firearms licensee. Now, the reason that I've got this in my head is I had a tax case one time when I found $1.5 million in improper sales tax being collected on rotisserie chickens in the state of Connecticut. And everybody thought I was a fucking nut. I was a nut. Yeah, I said it. Peter Talbot, I'm sorry. I did say it. Everybody thought I was a nut because I sued over 48-cent tax on a rotisserie chicken. But you see, it wasn't the one chicken. It was how many millions of chickens are sold over a 3-year period of time in the state of Connecticut. How many rotisserie chickens are sold and improperly taxed? That was my issue. Now, there were excuses given, not just by the grocery chain. Well, we're from out of state and we can't program our computers to collect tax for all of the different states, so we just do it one way. We had in an audit report the state of Connecticut saying this particular supermarket is collecting sales tax improperly. We told them they had to correct it. They said that they could not. So we told them, well, if you can't correct it and you're going to continue improperly collecting sales tax, just make sure that you send it to us. In other words, if you don't keep the improper sales tax, send it to the state. $1.5 million. So now we have, on October 1st, 2009, the state of Connecticut doubled the fees for everything. Doubled it. What used to be 35 is now 70. What used to be 25 is now 50. And at least in the state criminal history background check for a pistol permit applied through a local issuing authority, there's absolutely no authority to even collect the money. Legislature never approved it. But the courts, in their infinite wisdom, well, you know, that's okay. Not where I come from. Not where Attorney Baird comes from, because I'm going to tell everybody, I mean, she's not sitting here tonight, so I've got a chance to say things that I probably wouldn't say if she was sitting here. But I don't know if she's at home watching this. Maybe her neighbor's watching and her neighbor will tell her about it. But it goes like this. For everybody out there that reads her name in the newspaper, sees her in front of the microphones on TV, hears her interviewed on the radio, I know that attorney Rachel M. Baird, Yale, class of 92, is not a huge firearm enthusiast. She doesn't own a firearm. She didn't own a firearm. She does have a pistol permit. And I don't mind saying that to everybody. Attorney Baird has a pistol permit. But she is not a person, and she's a Democrat. I used to be a Democrat. But Attorney Baird is not the big gun person. What Attorney Rachel Baird is, and we've had this conversation privately a number of times, she's a person who reads the law and believes that the law needs to be followed. She is a person who reads the law and explains it to people that come into her office, or has to explain it to people who come into their office or she has to go see them in a lockup. You explain the law to your clients. Now, I believe that Rachel Baird is probably the purest Second Amendment attorney, because she's not in it because of the guns. She's in it because of the constitutional rights. She's in it because of the wording of the statutes. And that really separates her from a lot of other people. Rachel has said to me, open carry in Connecticut is legal. If the state does not want people to open carry a firearm, then they need to mandate concealment like other states. Rachel says you don't go into someone's home without a warrant. She doesn't care what the Superior Court says. She doesn't care what the Appellate Court says. Rachel, to this day, even when the cases were lost, still believes you do not. There are certain extenuating, exigent circumstances, whatever, but Rachel Baird believes today, June 7th, 2014, you do not go into someone's home without the warrant. And when you leave, you hand it to somebody, you leave them a copy. That's what makes her the purest when it comes to discussing firearms issues or issues. She can put her nose into a library. She can walk into a library, get lost in a library. I think she should be living in a library. But really, she's not the big gun enthusiast. So this whole thing, okay, delays, are all people flaunting the law. And it inflames Attorney Baird. It inflames me. I was referenced this past week, June 5th, 2 days ago. I had an Assistant Attorney General classify me as a serial requester. FOI, serial requester. Well, here's the plain and simple facts. If I could simply call somebody up and get the answer, or call somebody up and have them hand me a piece of paper, I wouldn't have to be filing a written request, or when they deny me, filing a written complaint. But that doesn't happen. List. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a topic. You know these police cars that are running around with these license plate readers on them? Well, evidently, there's Tampa, Florida, maybe. The American Civil Liberties Union had filed an FOI request for information and data. The U.S. Marshal's Office came in during the pendency of that request and took all of the information because they didn't want the ACLU to see it. Now, this is going to sound strange to everybody before we go to a break. I don't have anything to hide. If you want to have marker plate readers reading me as I drive by, my car is registered, my car is insured. I don't care where you see me. I got nothing to hide. But as a legal investigator, for a defense attorney, when our client says to us, I wasn't there, I was over there, I think that every private citizen should be able to walk into government and say, can you please tell me every place I've been in the last 24 months? I have to give the IRS a mileage log. And, could you please just give a printout of every place you saw my car? And I'll fill in the dots. I'll connect the dots. I don't care if they take it, as long as it's publicly available for everybody to look at. Because if I can't look at my information about where I was, who the hell do you think you are snapping it up and putting it in the database for somebody else to look at? So I think that we've got a break coming. And what I want Rich Burgess to do is we played a clip of a House Committee on Veterans Affairs meeting, and I think that it is timely during every show because the news cycle is trying to move away from what happened in the Veterans Administration, and I don't think that we should let it stop here. So, having said that, I'm watching them answer a phone. They're answering a phone in master control. So, I know that we have to take the 6 o'clock break. I have to tell you, my thoughts tonight are with Rachel Baird, her son, her mother, her brother. Yeah. So, time to take a break. Listen, we do have somebody on the phone that I think you're going to find very interesting. But I told you before we went on to the break that we have the clip from the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I think that this clip needs to be played probably during every show. But so with that, I'm going to ask Rich and Anna in Master Control if they can roll that clip. It's about 5 minutes long. So to the caller, I'll be right back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I question the witnesses, I first must call for the resignation of Secretary Shinseki. I was waiting for information to be gathered to make my judgment, and now it is in. Based on the interim Inspector General report that came out today, our veterans in Phoenix and maybe other cities have not been treated properly. This report states, quote, "Our review at a growing number of VA medical facilities have confirmed that inappropriate scheduling practices are systemic throughout VHA. The tragic possibility that veterans who have died while on the waiting list have died because of the waiting list is still open. The OIG will hopefully answer this in their final report, though not in this interim report. Even if the Secretary did not know in advance of these wrongdoings, and I don't believe he did, these violations should not have happened on his watch. I believe that Secretary Shinseki's service while in active duty was honorable. But success in the military does not automatically translate into success in the policy and political realms.
I'm just very, very frustrated that, that I'm in a position to make a difference and I can't do anything. I can't get across to you or the whole, and it's a feeling of frustration. If I was smarter than most people here, I'd say, okay, you got to do this, 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 and this. But right now, I think you need the discipline to go down there. Certain people have got to be relieved. They've got to be fired. These policies have got to be changed almost overnight. And we can't accept excuses or the fact that the lawyers are handling it anymore. Sorry, I should have asked questions, but that's been something that's been bugging me, and I apologize. Thank you. I yield back my 1 second.
Colonel, thank you for your service to this country. We are honored to have you as part of our committee.
The fingerprints of you all that are at this panel today are all over this problem, because I can tell you, you are not being forthright in your testimony. And I think the model for the Veterans Administration, and let me tell you, there are a lot of good young men and women, or not, of all ages, that work for the Veterans Administration, the rank and file. And they are, and some of them are the whistleblowers. Because without them, we would have no idea what's going on. Because the leadership of the VA simply is not there. And the tragedy here is that the impression that you give, all three of you today, is that you are here to serve yourselves and not the men and women that have made extraordinary sacrifices defending this country.
You've heard several different people asking the question, does the buck stop with you? Do you accept this responsibility? Are you ready to accept this responsibility and look in the eyes of the American people and our veterans and say what? What do you say tonight? I know what you don't know. What do you know that you can tell the American people that they can learn in 2.5 hours of a committee meeting?
Congresswoman, our focus remains on caring for these veterans. We join you
case,
in
Ms.
this.
Mooney,
May I finish?
No, because I have 5 minutes. Ms. Mooney, if that has been the case, how could Dr. Lynch go to Arizona and not talk to anybody involved that had anything directly to do with this? And there's 40 unexplained deaths. There's an IG report that has fact. And you all seem to have turned the facts to a general counsel, and we know less tonight. I have more questions tonight than I've had when I walked in here, because we learned what you don't know. But my question is, and it's going to have to go unanswered, what do you know?
We know that the facts of that report are utterly reprehensible. That is what we know. And we owe a debt to all our veterans who served. Every one of them.
So are you responsible?
I'll
you accept
take
that responsibility?
Absolutely.
What are you going to do with that responsibility? Are you going to stay in your position? Are you going to apologize?
I am going to.
Are you going to resign?
Congresswoman, I'm going to stay in my position and fight for veterans and fight for this Congress that I love. Working together and really meaning it. Working together for the good of our veterans. That's what the public expects, and that's what I'm committed to.
Look what the public got. The public got, and 40 veterans died. This is what the public got.
And we understand that, and we view that report as totally, the facts of the report, as totally reprehensible, inexcusable, and unconscionable.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney.
Every time I watch it, my blood starts to boil. Now, I believe there may be a phone call. Okay. If that phone call comes in, just let me know. Now, I read, I've said this before. There's a newspaper in the state of Connecticut called the Connecticut Law Journal. Now, primarily, their market, their business plan, their market, their business model, I should say, is directed towards attorneys. And I really never paid attention to it because I didn't know too much about it until I started working in Rachel Baird's office. And Rachel Baird subscribes to the Connecticut Law Tribune, and it comes into the office once a week. And I wish I had a copy of it. And Rachel and I have talked about starting to just read the bold printed cases because they actually publicize various cases and the way the courts have ruled in the state of Connecticut. Now, I have an article here tonight that really shocks me, and it was written by Dave Collins from the Associated Press, and it was published yesterday at 3:18 p.m. So here's what it says, and this is an AP story. Court. Trust funds a factor in rejecting Medicaid. Now, I'm going to read it verbatim, and I hope that Dave Collins doesn't get mad at me, but there must be some fair use, but it's got to go further than this. Hartford, Connecticut. The Connecticut Supreme Court says state officials can reject Medicaid coverage for nursing home patients if their spouse has if their spouses have trust funds, no matter if those funds were never intended to benefit the patient. The High Court noted Friday that the Department of Social Services was justified in rejecting Medicaid coverage in 2010 for Daniel Bork of Summers, who died later that year. Bork applied for Medicare in 2009 after spending all his money for nursing home care. But the Social Services Department ruled he wasn't eligible because his wife had a $500,000 trust fund. Now listen to this. Lawyers for Bork's wife, Mary Palumba Bork, argued the fund was established for her and her children, her and her children's well-being, by her late first husband in 1968, and was never intended to be deleted for Daniel Bork's care. Now, before I take a phone call, let me see if I understand what I just read. I'm going to be with the caller in a minute. I just want to wrap this up. If you're married to someone in 1968 and a trust is established to take care of a surviving spouse and children, and the trust exists. Years later, the surviving spouse remarries. And while she's married to her new husband, the trust exists. But the new spouse is terminally ill and goes into a nursing home. And all of the new spouse's resources, and let's even say pretty much the family resources, are expended to cover the nursing home for the new spouse. Now they're depleted. The new spouse applies for Medicaid to go on to Medicaid. The state looks at the trust that was set up exclusively for the wife and the children from the first marriage. The guy who set up the trust didn't even know the name of the guy she was going to marry in the future. He said, if I die, I want my wife and my children to be taken care of. That was the reason for the trust. Now, In 2014, the Connecticut Supreme Court in the state of Connecticut says, oh no, you depleted your funds, but you didn't deplete the funds of your wife and your children. Funds that weren't theirs to begin with, wasn't established by them to conceal anything. It was money established in a trust by a person who died. Something is not right about that. If I establish a trust to take care of my grandchildren, my children and their children, and sometime down the road, my daughter is married to a guy who, and they, whatever, and then the state says, well, he can't go on Medicaid because Mr. Peruta, back in 2014, established a trust for his daughter and his grandchildren, so that money has to be used first to take care of this man. You know, you wonder why people don't get married today. You wonder why they just live together. You wonder why the millennium generation is saying, screw that marriage shit? Why children are being born out of wedlock and people aren't getting married? Boy, I can tell you. Phone call. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Can you turn that volume down, Rich? Okay. Matt, how you doing?
Good.
Turn it up a little. We're playing right now, Matt.
Well, okay. I'll talk a little bit so you can adjust the levels.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay.
You're Matt Tiska.
Yep.
You live in northwestern Connecticut.
Correct.
You're a retired lieutenant colonel with the Connecticut State Police.
Yes.
You obviously didn't get there by screwing up.
Well, I don't know.
You're one of the named amicus in Shu v. Malloy.
Yes.
And you have some pretty strong feelings about Second Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
For honest people, Matt.
Oh, of course.
Honest, law-abiding citizens.
That's correct.
So, you know that I'm having issues with the Connecticut State Police trying to obtain information to put up on a website so that the public can access it. There's some feedback going on. Turn him down just a little bit, probably. Yo, here it goes.
Okay.
Why don't you take this time, and then I'm going to ask you a question before you do this. Give a little bit of your background, because I met you through Attorney Baird's office, because your wife is a court stenographer that the office uses in depositions.
Yes, that's correct.
And I didn't meet you until you came to the Prospect Street office one day, and I knew who you were, I knew about you, but I hadn't really met you until we met at the office.
Yeah, that's correct. That was the first time, and that was probably 3 years ago or so.
And it has to be probably three and a half years ago.
Yeah. All right.
You've also worked in a capacity other than law enforcement outside of the country and put yourself in harm's way.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
After I retired, that's my new job.
Right. Well, I mean, let's put it this way. Not everybody that's overseas fighting bad guys is a member of the military.
Oh, no, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of moving parts to our foreign policy efforts.
Right. So I'm not going to go any further than that. What is your opinion of giving up 5 Gitmo high-ranking officials for anything?
Well, I think that was a very poor judgment on his part. If a war is over, everybody gets to page data and they make their settlements. But your war is continuing, these people are going back to an active war against us. And as you said at the beginning, they're found, we presume them innocent and proven guilty because that's our due process and our legal system. But these five guys did it back and hurt the United States. I mean, people have to realize people don't just walk around the mountains in Afghanistan or Pakistan. They're coming here, and they have to. And we also have, from here, U.S. citizens over there to Syria, right, that train, and they're coming back. So I think what the exchange was, primarily, it was a political deal by Obama because he wants to close Gitmo anyway. And he's just doing that like he does most other things, is entropy.
Matt, let me ask you a question. Are you on a cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. It could be the cell phone that if you were on a hard line, it'd probably be a better connection. But I want anybody that's watching this to understand you're in northwestern Connecticut on a cell phone. Now, let me tell you the things that let me tell you the things that went through my mind. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Anna's tweaking the volume. Give me a 10 count.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's good, right there.
5, 6. Okay.
Okay. Let me tell you what went through my mind. And it didn't go through my mind where I put myself with the American flag around me. I put myself in the Middle East. Okay? For thousands of years, people have gone into the Middle East and tried to play with the people in the Middle East that live in their mud huts, that have tribal government. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
I thought about Nelson Mandela coming out of prison after 27 years to a hero's welcome by the ANC. He became the George Washington of South Africa. What we did was we gave pride to the terrorist objectives. We gave them people to look up to, people to follow, people who, yes, they did 10 years, 12 years, 13 years in Gitmo. But guess what? They're going to follow their Muslim customs, and they will be revered in the Middle East. And they will get followers in the Middle East. So
we have a habit of making heroes out of people and giving them legitimacy. That's the problem with the United States. And then they come back and bite us, and we can't understand. I'm not saying we as you and me, but we as a society can't understand. Gee, we did all this for them. How come they don't like us?
yeah, because I'm not
People speaking this.
I'm not concerned with the picking up of the missing soldier. I'm not concerned with what is going to happen to him. I am concerned with, we have taken 5 senior, high-ranking, high-profile people and put them in the Middle East. They could all get together. I mean, they've been living on the same island of Cuba for 10 years. They could form their own little organization amongst themselves. And I'm sure that they would have rallies that would make our rallies look like nothing. It makes me nervous.
Well, it should. It should make everyone nervous. Because these people are definitely committed. They're not like in World War II there were a lot of conscripts on both sides, and they did their job and they did it well. They believed in their country. But these people are fanatics. Okay, there's no national honor or anything. It's Islam, and Islam commands them to do X, Y, and Z. And we're infidels. They're coming after us. It should scare everybody.
Well, I believe that the Middle East is a culture that we're not going to change. We are not going to change it. We went into Iraq. We came out of Iraq, and what did we leave in Iraq? What do they call it? The green zone?
Yes.
It's like, let me see if I can put this in perspective. The Capitol building in Hartford claims to represent the state of Connecticut, when in fact, I don't think it does. The green zone has nothing to do with Anbar province, the northern tribal areas where Saddam Hussein came from. You got Sunni and Shia. Now, if you stop and look at it and you say, in Afghanistan, you think Karzai's running the country? He's not running the country. The tribal elders run the country. And they run it each little piece on their own. And I think that Pakistan, what's the capital of Pakistan? Karachi? Islamabad. Islamabad doesn't control the northeast tribal region, the northwest tribal region along the Afghan border. They don't control that. The tribal elders do.
Right, and that's one thing our State Department, when they go somewhere, they don't take into account a lot of the local tribes, customs, geopolitical makeup of the place. They go in there thinking that we're the Americans, we know best, and here's what we're going to do for you. And it never works.
Let's support the Arab Spring in Egypt. We want free elections. And when they elected somebody from the Muslim Brotherhood, we don't like that. Popular vote. You got what you wanted.
Well, they do things that have unintended consequences.
Boy.
Like you were talking about, the state of Connecticut bureaucracy and permits, licensing, and hearings. Well, they all have the good ideas when they pass the laws and then pass regulations, but the unintended consequences is that they can't carry it out the way it's supposed to be.
Well,
and what we're saying is that if you can't do it right, don't do it at all, or fix it.
Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I know that you live up in northwestern Connecticut. I won't say the town you live in. Don't want to give out the name and address of a pistol permit holder.
Thank you.
I am not going to be here on Saturday night, June 21st.
Okay.
I am not going to be here the Saturday night, I believe June 28th would be 7 days after that. And I'm probably not going to be here around 4th of July. What I'm doing is flying my two granddaughters out to California and then going to bring them back over a 3-week period of time in the RV and let them see Yellowstone and Buffalo and Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse and Legoland and the Golden Gate Bridge and all of that stuff. Would you mind making the trip down here from northwestern Connecticut and sitting in with Rachel and being with her on TV?
Sure, I can do that. The only date I believe would be, the 27th, that Saturday. I won't be available.
21st is a Saturday, so it has to be the 28th is a Saturday. But listen,
okay.
We'll coordinate it, but they're going to be cutting us off pretty soon. It's getting towards the end of the show. But let me leave you with something else that worries me. And you see, you are, in my opinion, a source of information because you've got a law enforcement background, not just at the patrol level. You know what it's like to be in those meetings at the top. And I don't care. When did you retire? Okay. You and I both know that it doesn't change much from decade to decade of how it works at the top.
No, generally not.
It doesn't. And I know that you have a law enforcement background, and that's law enforcement management background. Bill Knapp, for example, my cousin, he still maintains the executive mindset of what was going on and what is going on. And I got to wrap this up, but I want to just leave you with this thought and to everybody else. We're dealing with people who actually take a carpet, face Mecca, and pray twice a day, and they're willing to give their life up for what they believe in. That's the difference between them and us.
Exactly.
Listen, gotta go. I'm all done, right?